learning to kind of understand your own story and your own identity, and being able to, write your own goals is something that has definitely helped me kind of manage any sort of expectation. And yeah, there's been definitely a lot of work on resilience as well, on how to kind of manage those expectations, understand why I do my sport. Is it just because I've been brought up and I'm following and it's second nature, or do I actually have that internal drive to also be the best version of myself, get the results I'm capable of? And so to kind of have this goal as of now, that's like, okay, well, it is actually a possibility to go to the Olympics, and this is my goal, and this is actually just my project that everyone can help me work towards.
Hey, welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast. I'm your host, Jackie Tan, and I'm grateful that you are joining me. Today on the show, I have a truly inspiring guest. She is a French-born Australian slalom canoeist who's been making waves in the world of canoe slalom since 2013. She is Noemi Fox, with an impressive career that includes multiple medals at the ICF Canoe Slalom World Championships. She is a true force to be reckoned with in the sport. She comes from a family deeply rooted in canoe slalom, with her father being Richard Fox, her mother Miriam Fox, her aunt Rachel Crosby, and her older sister Jessica Fox. Noemi's dedication and passion for canoeing are truly remarkable. In September, along with Kate Eckhart and her sister Jess, they made history by becoming the first Australian paddlers to win the K1 Team World Championships. Throughout this episode, we will dive deep into her journey from the very beginning. She helps to simplify the rules and techniques of slalom, canoe, kayak, and kayak cross, which is just one of my favorite things, because if you've seen any of those events, it is so exciting to watch. It's so intense to watch, and especially the kayak cross where they do a roll under the water, and it's super fun to watch. So you'll have to join me as we dive deep into what makes kayak cross so exciting, and she does break down the rules for us. We also explore the wisdom she's gained along the way that can inspire not only aspiring athletes, but anyone striving for excellence in their chosen path. Her genuine warmth, humility, and sportsmanship shone through during our discussion. It was so delightful. She's so wonderful. And I can't wait for you to hear this interview with the incredible Noemi Fox. Noemi, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast.
Thanks, Jackie. It's exciting to be here.
It is exciting. You have a collection of medals to your name, recently winning gold with your team members for K1 in London with your sister Jess and Kate Eckhart. Firstly, congratulations. Secondly, did you know that you are the first Australian paddlers to win the K1 World Championship?
Thank you. And you've done your research.
course.
I actually didn't know that we were the first Australians to win that specific event, and that definitely made it a little bit more special. But yeah, honestly, winning a world title with teammates is the best feeling ever. I think we're such an individual sport, and we don't get to do team events often. And it made me think, if I could do any other Olympic sport, I'd do something like a relay in swimming, because being able to share that with other people is so special. And yeah, being the first Australians, I think, was equally as special, because compared to other European nations, I come from a very European dominated sport, and they get to practice that sort of event all the time, and unfortunately we don't. So I think it was so cool to be able to share that with the team, and bring back a first world title for our country in that event.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. So when did you find out that you were the first Australians?
My mum, who's also my coach and our coach, she told us straight away. She's like, "We made it."
Brilliant. She's all over it.
Yeah, so they were all over it, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool, yeah." And then it kind of, you calculate it, and you think, "Oh, yeah," going back because it's a small sport, so you know the history of the sport. And we had actually won a world title in the canoe, but never in the kayak. And yeah, it was a really cool way to start the world championships and to be able to share that with family and friends that were all there as well. And yeah, it's just really, really cool to I guess experience that in sport and to have that sort of opportunity to live through those emotions. It's kind of what keeps you
Yeah.
going, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. You are in the history books. And you mentioned your mum obviously being your coach, and your parents are Olympians, obviously Jess as well, best in the world. I would really love for you to take it back for us from the very beginning. I mean, it seems like you would have been in a kayak or canoe before you could walk. Tell us about your memories of growing up and getting into the sport.
Yeah, I mean, the entry into the sport and sitting in a kayak was inevitable. I think, when I look back, I was like, well, it's in the blood, and being on a riverbank is what we grew up doing. But as you mentioned, both my parents were Olympians and world champions. My dad competed for GB and my mum for France. And we moved to Australia in 2000. It was just meant to be for a year or two for the Sydney 2000 Olympics, but I think they fell in love with the lifestyle of Australia and just, the space and the opportunity and having two young kids. So we ended up staying here and grew up at the Sydney 2000 Olympic venue. I mean, I feel like most of my childhood is sitting on those riverbanks and watching, the senior team go down. And we were lucky that we'd get to travel with them because they were coaches. So we'd follow them around for their senior international tour. And yeah, I think it's a pretty cool upbringing when I think about it, traveling and being able to just watch people paddle. And I remember, I think around like maybe 6, 7, 8, those family holidays, there were always our two little blue kayaks. And it was more of like oh, come on, we're on holidays. Like, I don't want to go kayaking. But they were just so passionate about it and making it like that sort of family activity that we do.
Yeah.
So we'd reluctantly, go out with my sister and do those kayaking trips. And actually around the age of, I think it was 12, when I started doing a little bit more whitewater. When you flip the kayak, you're meant to either pull your skirt to eject out of it or roll back up. And I didn't do either of those. I just I think
Just
panicked
bobbed in the
and
water.
flipped and just bobbed in the water. And eventually it felt like minutes, but it must have been just a few seconds. Someone flipped me back up and they were, really angry, and they're like, "Oh, you pull your deck, etc." And it was just the event that was like, I'm done with this. I do not like this. That was traumatizing. And for a whole year, even more, I just didn't step in the kayak. I was like, not for me. So I did a little bit of gymnastics, tumbling, dancing, swimming as well. But I didn't like swimming because mum made me do the swimming group with my sister who's older. And so they were so much better than me, and they'd like touch my feet being like, hurry up, And so I hated swimming. And so we went back to kayaking eventually. And yeah, I think at the age of 14, when I did my first international trip in a talent development squad, we went to New Zealand. That was the key moment for me where I realized, oh wow, this sport's so much fun. I can travel, I can make friends, I can, go to places, I guess, on my own merit in a way, not just following a team or not just following my parents. And I guess those key things of like the social part of the sport, the traveling and making memories is still to this day what really kind of makes me continue it and drives me. So yeah, I guess it was inevitable, but eventually they successfully, after a lot of forcing, passed on their passion, and we get up every day, or I get up every day for my own goals and for my own, out of my own will as well to paddle. So yeah, they worked out well for them and for the whole family.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny that, I mean, I obviously didn't know about, your traumatic experience going under. I watched your this year the kayak cross, which involves a boat
It
roll,
does involve going under.
which I mean, I think about, and that like gives me anxiety to think about. But watching you do it, so unbelievably smooth and just like nothing. Like a duck to water. Just it was so unbelievable, and I really want to dive deeper into that in a moment. But I want to come back to, you said that, you know, it is a dream being able to travel and, you know, make friends and make memories. It sounds like the dream, like incredible. Tell me about, you know, what it is to do this sport in terms of, you said the travel, and you earlier mentioned that it's more of a European sport. Does
Mm.
that mean every time you compete it is overseas? Like how does that work, and
Yeah.
how often are you spending time overseas compared to being in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, it is a sport that requires a lot of commitment away, that's for sure. Yeah, as I said, it's a European-based sport, which means that most of the venues that we compete on that are up to international standard, they are in Europe. And I guess we used to compete a little bit more on natural rivers. So I know back in the day, my parents went more to Canada and Brazil and the US as well, and Asia, which, you know, sounds really great. But now, because of the Olympics and the Olympic standard, it is more artificial whitewater courses, and the ones that are up to standard are, like I said, in Europe. So we have our domestic season where we have the Australian Open and the Oceania Champs in Sydney at our course, or sometimes in Auckland, and that's in January or early Feb. And then we head overseas. Kind of depends when the season starts, but the first World Cups are normally in June, and we have 3 or 4 in a row, and then the World Championships, which also kind of depends on the calendar. This year it was in September, so we had to wait from I was in Europe from the start of May to prepare to kind of get exposure to those courses, because it's you know, I guess the home favorite is really something like the home advantage is something that's really strong in our sport. So you really want to get practice on those courses, which means us as an Australian nation, we have to go earlier to acclimatize to everything, I guess. So early May, and then the start of the World Cups, and then quite a big gap, and a few of the Aussies actually went home, but I didn't really want to do 2 trips back and forth, so I stayed in Europe this year, and then did the Worlds end of September, and we had the Olympic test event at the start of October. So yeah, from the beginning of May until the 20th of October, I was overseas, which is a big chunk of the year. And sometimes it can be shorter. You know, I think next year there's no World Championships, so it might just be 2 months, but it is minimum 2 months away, up to 2 to 6, really, to be able to compete at the highest level and train on the courses that you would be doing the World Championships on. I guess it is a bit of a sacrifice. You can choose to go home and train on flat water or in the winter, but again, it's a summer sport, and it's definitely based in Europe, so you kind of have to make those sacrifices in a way.
Yeah, to what you said in terms of the home advantage, ha- I read somewhere that, um, is it the you don't know the course until you
Yeah.
actually you know,
Compete on it.
are
Yeah.
actually competing. So how much is that an advantage, even if you don't know what the course is going to look
The
like?
courses. Yeah, that's a great question. So how it works is that all throughout the week of training, and you know how long you choose to train on that course before, but you change the gates, you kind of practice what you want to do, what combinations you think they'll do with the upstream gates and the downstream gates, and then on the Thursday they have the demonstration run. So they set the course once the training is done, and they place it in, you know, you don't really know what course design they're going to do. You just get it on the day, and you watch the demonstration runners. They go down, they show you how to do it, and then that afternoon we have our qualification. So it is this sort of sport where visualization is super important. And I guess trusting yourself, because the more you train on a course, the more you can be like, okay, well, I did that last week, or I haven't done that particular move, but I know how to read the waves, or they did it really well like this, so I can trust that I've got those skills to deliver that sort of section. So yeah, I think there's a lot of mental part of that comes into the sport when you haven't practiced on that sort of course, and then it changes for the semi-final and the final. So if you're in the final, you've done it once before in the semi-final, and the goal is to up that as well.
Oh, so are you saying that in the semi-final and final, the course stays the same, or do they change the gates again?
Yeah,
Oh, it
the
stays the
course
same.
the course stays the same. Yeah, so that's the goal, is to do the course as many times as possible. So if you've
Yeah.
done it more than once, that means you've made the final. So
And so you get to practice, and put up your own gates during practice.
yeah, well, I mean, the gates will be kind of set on the day, and you can potentially move them, depends, who else you're training with, but you kind of practice just to get used to the certain wave features, the key, yeah, I guess the key features of that particular course, and what moves you kind of assume that they'll be doing. So there's a lot of repetition and practice involved, but a bit of creativity as well to kind of practice outside of the set gates, and to do what you kind of need to do to build your confidence, with the limited time that we have, to then when it comes time to the course design, it's like, okay, well, I've done that, or I haven't done that, but I know I'm capable, and did something similar, but it's the same sort of concept. So yeah, there's a lot of I guess just trust and confidence in your process and your
Yeah.
preparation, and past experience as well, to help you prepare for those events.
Yeah, and speaking of past experience, I don't know what you call them, the courses minus the gates, are they
Mhm.
all a specific length? Are they all the same? Like, what's
Um,
changes with the
I mean, that's a great question. They're definitely all different, but I can't really. I sound so non like I don't really know my sport that well. But in terms of like the distance of the courses, they do change, and like the shape. There are some straight courses. Um, there are some that are like connected to dams, so yeah, they just run straight, or some that are completely separate, like the one that we have for the Sydney 2000 Olympic course. It's connected to a big lake system, and it's like turned, kind of arced. But generally speaking, our effort that we do is around 90 to 120 seconds. I guess that's like the average. And yeah, the courses are different, like level of like elevation, so to speak, or like different wave depths and things like that. Some are really hard and scary with big drops. Others are like a little bit more flat. So I think that's what's also cool, is that in our sport, you're never really bored. You're not always running in the same straight line, or swimming, watching that black line. Like, you're always getting a bit of variety, and so many factors to take into consideration. And the fact that you do get to change gates or change waves and sequences really keeps it super fun and challenging. No matter the elite level that you get to, you always have something to learn and improve.
Yeah, I love that. It's such an exciting sport to watch. I'm literally watching you and, as you go around the gate, I'm like doing it
We're the
myself.
same. If we're if we're watching someone, and you feel like they're too close,
Yeah,
you
you're just
also,
like
you lean back
lean back.
as if it helps them.
Exactly. But I love it. And I'd love to go deeper into like the variables that you were mentioning. But before we do, for anyone who's unaware of the sport, or even the differences between the kayak and the canoe, can you break it down a little bit for us?
Yeah, definitely. So I compete across three disciplines, and there are only three disciplines for the men and three disciplines for the women as well. So we have kayak slalom, which is you go down in your carbon fiber kayak. I think it's around 3.5 meters and weighs 9 kilos. And you have two blades, so like the normal paddle you'd use if you go kayaking. And we go down the green gates and up the red ones. And then we have the canoe slalom, which is it's the same length and boat weight, but a different, I guess, fit out in the way you sit. You're kneeling and you only have one blade. So It's a little bit more technical, and you're sitting like more above the water, so completely different style of paddling, really. And then the third discipline is even more different, and it's a completely different category, and it's called kayak cross, like you said. And I this is always hard to explain because you say, oh, you go down a ramp and you're with four other people and you've got to chase each other down, and there's an Eskimo roll involved, and you do have gates, but they're bigger, I guess, floating buoys in a way that you hang up. And you've got to go around them, and you're allowed to hit them, and there's less penalties than in slalom, where the whole goal is to not hit the gates. So yeah, a little bit of differences there, and the kayak cross is a new Olympic discipline for Paris 2024, and hopefully the rest of the Olympics that are to come, because it's a super exciting um, event, and really a different challenge for a lot of slalom paddlers, because it's more of a recent addition to our program, and we're still kind of getting used to it. But it's really fun to have that sort of extreme element to our sport, and paddle in those plastic boats, and charge down with other people and be able to hit gates. It's just a completely
Yeah.
different mentality and approach to what we've been doing for this whole time.
It looks brutal.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I've
just
got a few
watching them
permanent
like
bruises.
but yeah, exactly, and boats going over boats?
Yeah, it is very savage, and I have to say this year was a bit of a shock getting back to the start line after having not seen, the international, my competitors for that whole break. And the level definitely went up. And I think everyone was more used to it, more aggressive. No one wanted to lose, or, no one wanted to give up and like back down. So it's the sort of race where it happens on a Sunday, and on Monday I wake up and I'm like, oh, I feel like I have a bruise, and then I look in the mirror and I've got a huge bruise. But there's definitely this big like adrenaline that comes from, going down and either chasing someone or feeling like you are being chased and you've got to go so fast. It's a really fun sport. And super exciting to kind of see it evolve now that it's an Olympic sport, and to see everyone take it way more seriously, and progress so rapidly, and have all these new techniques and innovative styles come through, and to be able to have to learn quickly to put those into play, because they are more efficient or they're faster. And it's been also a little bit more collaborative, seeing as there's four of us out there. So yeah, it's been just a really cool challenge to adopt and take on board.
You mentioned you get to be really creative and innovative. How much can you do that? I mean, I don't know how much you can make up when you're sitting in a kayak,
Yeah,
but like,
yeah.
what are the possibilities?
I mean, look, we are bound to quite a few strict rules, and I think
Yeah.
over the last year, people tried to be super innovative and creative, and then the governing board came back and was like, actually, no, we don't want that, or that's
Mm-mm.
too innovative, that is banned. So something that was quite frustrating for us to deal with is all these rule changes based on everyone's like adaptation of the rules, and innovative styles and things like that. But what I mean by, I guess, innovative and creative is the fact that we were coming from a slalom background, and, a sport that had been developing for such a long period of time, since the first Olympic Games in 1972. And for us, this is the first Olympic Games in 2024. So it is quite fresh. And the people that are paddling now, they are, I guess, the pioneers, so to speak, and the ones that are kind of developing those key styles that we're all learning from. So I guess just more of a creative change to the carbon fiber 3 meter boats. These are much shorter and they're whippier, and yeah, just changing our whole style of paddling for this discipline has been a really cool thing for us to all go through.
It looks really fun. In terms of the governing board changing things and putting in more rules, do you think that's because what athletes were doing were either making it easier or getting an advantage based on what they were doing, or was it dangerous? what they were doing?
Yeah, so the International Canoe Federation, they're the ones that put in place the rules. I can't really go into the specifics because I'll probably say something wrong. But basically, I think what we saw is there was a bit of a dangerous element to it with, especially in the kayak men, those are quite a little bit stronger. I think with us, in the female category, we paddle the same weighted boat as the men, but we're naturally lighter, so it's harder for us to move it as quickly or to displace it as quickly. Whereas there are some 100-kilo paddlers paddling the same boat as us, and they can just move it super quickly. So what we saw was a little bit of not foul play, but I guess too much contact, and that's something they wanted to limit. So there were rules put in place with that. So having more of a helmet that protects your ears, and as opposed to the helmet that we wear for the slalom, where we're all by ourselves and not meant to fall in, and also with the paddles to not have sharp ends of the blade in case you slice someone or hit their face. And then just the way you kind of go about the gates. I think what we saw a few years ago or even last year was people obstructing the gates to make sure that the person behind them had no shot of getting that gate, and that's not something that they wanted to encourage as well. So it's definitely hard to kind of invent these rules and change them as they go, and for us on the other side to adapt to that and to be impacted by it. And I guess it's something that is quite frustrating if you get disqualified for something last year, in my case, that's now allowed. It can be quite hard, but I think it's part of the learning journey of setting up a new sport, and we all have to kind of
Yeah.
understand that that's part of the process.
So did you get disqualified for something last
Oh, yeah,
year?
last year a few things happened. One was that I had my blade in the water, and someone like just came up behind, and so my blade hit their stomach, and it was foul play because I hit someone with their stomach even though they kind of just got shot forward from behind. And then the other one was I rolled a little bit too early under the roll zone that we're meant to have, and I was the first heat to go through, and they said, no, we don't want that. The next heats just kept on doing it, and they said, oh, well, we can't disqualify everyone. So, yeah, it's allowed. And, I think there's frustrating moments in sport that you kind of, it's easy to dwell on them and say, oh, that's so unfair. Like now I'm out and it's an extra shot. But I think with our sport, there are so many times in life and in your races that it's unfair. If the wind picks up and the gates hit you and you don't hit them, or if there's other things that happen, and it's really about how you kind of get back up on the horse and learn from that experience and approach the next race. So yeah, lots of variables in this sport, and you've just kind of got to keep it light and move forward and not let it
Yeah.
affect you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean that would be such you'd really have to work on that mental aspect, I mean, in life and in all sports. And I do wanna ask you a few questions around that, but I'm still so interested in the sport and, like, the technical side of things, because I mean, coming from being a massage therapist and just like working with athletes and trying to break down their movements so I get a good understanding of whether it's either overworking certain areas of the body and whatnot. It just fascinates me so much. So I'd love to know, like, in terms of, the kayak and canoe, you said in the canoe, you're kneeling.
Mhm.
So does that you said because that brings you higher above the water. Do you feel like you still though have an advantage because your center of gravity is kind of more central and so you can maneuver, I mean, I don't know how you do this, but like are you maneuvering with your hips better or like
Yeah,
how
I
does this
I
work, the
think so.
differences?
Yeah, I think so. And with the canoe, there's definitely more of a smooth style to it. I think like you said, that center of gravity, you're more centered, and you do want to use your hips and your shoulders a little bit more. Whereas I find that in the kayak, you're a little bit more at the back, and you're not leaning forward as much, and really trying to go fast because you've got two blades. And yeah, a lot of the time your core's super engaged because you're at the back. But in C1, you don't want to necessarily be at the back. You want to be more forward. And I think it is such a completely different style. In C1, I find that I can use the water features a little bit more. do less strokes, but the strokes are more effective in taking me to where I want to go because I've just got one blade. I don't have two. And in kayak, there's more of that powerful element and fast, explosive cutting the lines because you've got those two blades. So I think doing the two is something that's really great because there's so much to take from both of them and so many transferable skills and I guess like I don't want to say vision, but like paddle placements and what you do in canoe. So a lot of the girls actually double up. It's less common in the guys, I think, because the canoe event was only recently added in the slalom program as well in 2009. I mean, not that recent, but compared to, like I said, the 1972 Olympics, yeah, it's quite a recent development. So a lot of the women started picking up C1 and K1, so that's canoe and kayak. And now to this day, there's a lot of people that do both. And it's funny because this season, watching the junior and under 23 world championships, there's a lot of boys that are starting to do both too. And it's kind of, it's turned a page in the history books. I think they're also seeing that it is cool to do the two and it gives you another opportunity. And there are so many transferable skills as well. So, yeah, it's really cool to do both and see how sometimes a course design feels so much easier in canoe or vice versa. And it keeps the sport really fun and always feels like a challenge to learn.
Amazing. And so do you do the same course with both the kayak and the canoe?
For an event, yeah,
For-
it's always the same course. So the quals are the same on kayak and the same for canoe, and then it's just the kayak cross, which is a completely different event with different gates and a different course design. But yeah, the canoe and the kayak are always the same, and obviously quite slower in the canoe considering you just have that one blade, but sometimes you're not far off. If a course is super technical and smooth, sometimes you can challenge yourself a little bit and not be too far away from your kayak time. So yeah, I think they are completely different like technical elements to both of those, but there's so much that is the same and applicable and to kind of bring over to both of your categories.
And so when you do a run, say do you normally do kayak or canoe first, or it doesn't really matter? It's different anywhere you go.
Look,
Okay.
that changes. Last year it was kayak all the time, and now it was canoe, and then end of season it was kayak. So I'm equally as lost as to which one comes first now.
So you do whichever one first, and you walk away from that and you go, well, now I'm about to do the kayak. When I did the canoe, these are the areas that could have done better. Are you able then to is that
Mhm.
equally easy transferable into the kayak, or is it like because they're different in the
Yeah.
way you move, the way you're sitting, it's
I mean, I think there's definitely like an element that you take away from it. So if we have the canoe first and you have a great run, it gives you an opportunity to kind of understand where the gates are, if it was harder than expected, easier than expected, and like the gate height as well. If if that's more physical, if you can cut the lines, or if you really have to, avoid those big white stoppers, and then I think there's definitely transferable skills, and like I said before, like the vision of where the gates are and where you need to put your boat that you take forward to the next race that you have, even in a different discipline. The only time where it is hard sometimes if you have to do, if you didn't make it through the first round of qualification in the canoe and then you've got to do the second run, and then that afternoon you've got the first qualification of the kayak, and you kind of can carry that weight of fatigue or just that emotional baggage if it didn't go well. That's when it's kind of hard doing two categories. But again, it kind of depends how you see it. If you didn't make it through the canoe, you think, well, I've got another shot, I'll learn from my mistakes. And sometimes it's like you're just so caught on what went wrong, and doing another event on that same course can be really hard. So again, it is really how you kind of choose to walk away from certain situations and what you choose to take from it. But normally, in when all goes well, there's definitely a lot to kind of take and analyze and apply to your next discipline.
and so in that situation, how do you recoup and get the headspace back to where it needs to be?
Yeah. It is hard. I actually have a good story about this. It was in 2018 in Italy at the Under 23 World Championships. I did my first run in my kayak and the first round of qualifications, and I got a 50-second penalty, which means that I either missed a gate or I was too tight. My head didn't go through or my boat didn't go through, and they thought, nah, 50, she's missed it. So when you get a 50-second penalty, you always are knocked out because that adds 50 seconds to your time. And so I did the second run, and then my boat was disqualified because it was underweight. And I thought it was at the right weight, and it wasn't at the right weight. So that was a bit of an emotional turmoil because you did a good run and then you're knocked out for something that, one, feels so unfair, but two, is so stupid because it's on you. You have to control your equipment. For 100 grams too light, that's not going to make the difference of you winning, but it is the rules, and that's something that you're meant to be on top of. So I carried all that weight and baggage of being like, whoa, this was my key event. I'm a top athlete in this category. I should be winning a medal in this event. And I didn't even make it through the qualifications. And then carrying that to the canoe. And I did my first run of the canoe and I didn't make it through the first round. And I thought, this day is not my day. Horrible. And I remember being in the start pond for my second run. And this girl that I knew, who was funny, from Slovenia, she was quite blunt, that sort of style. She said, wow, your day cannot get any worse. And I thought, well, you know what? It actually could. If I don't make it through this round, then you can say that to me. And so I made it through in the canoe, and I thought, okay, you know what? Tomorrow starts from scratch. Everyone that's made it through, it's the semi-finals. We all have a blank page. And I ended up making the final, and then I won bronze at that event, which was really great. That was my first World Championship individual medal. And it was a really great lesson for me in terms of, how to overcome and not carry that baggage into your next competition, how to try and, digest it as quick as possible and learn from it, and just compartmentalize and remove that negative energy and the what ifs and the how embarrassing, all of that negative self-talk. And then to also be able to process it and say, okay, well, actually, tomorrow's a new start list. Everyone's on a blank page. No matter how hard it was for me to get here and how easy for some people, we all start from scratch tomorrow. So I think that was definitely a big part of how I approach now my racing, with quite a heavy schedule, having added the kayak cross, which is another discipline. But yeah, definitely one of the key learning events, I think, of my career in terms of processing like emotions, but also making sure my equipment passes.
I mean, you always take something from your mistakes, right? And if it means you're double checking
definitely
everything to the last gram, then so be it. I'd love to talk more about kayak cross because it seems intense. When you found out about this event and that you'd have to start from a ramp, what were your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, luckily they eased us into the ramp. So the first ramp was quite small that I ever did. And I was like, oh, this is okay. And then I remember watching a World Cup, and they tested a new ramp and it was really high. And I remember thinking, no way am I ever doing that. And they did a test run, and the guy went down and he actually, I don't know what sort of injury he had, but he hurt his back and was on bed rest for the rest of the season. So I thought, not for me. I'm not doing that. But since then, they've put in, regulations and testing to make sure that it is super achievable. And I have to say, it's one of my favorite parts of the kayak cross event. It's starting and, having that like kick that's like, okay, we're off, it's not something that we get to see in the slalom. And there are so many great ramps out there, but I have to say, finishing off the season in Paris, so where the Olympics will be next year, and that ramp looks very, very high and looks way more impressive than it is. And the first training session I did, I was standing on the top thinking, oh God, I feel sick. This is high. And you just got to kind of launch yourself off it. And so I launched myself off it, and it was actually so much better than I expected. But you do kind of get to a level where you learn to master that. I don't even know what it's called. I guess like the landing, the stomp that you do, and the technique to make sure that you're not landing flat. Because as soon as you kind of just land super flat, it can be quite a big impact on your back. But we do practice landing a little bit forward or a little bit at the back, and kind of getting that really good swoosh feeling at the start of your run. And it does get a little bit scarier when you're 4x4. Sometimes, you think they land on you and you're like, get off me, or like everyone gets a little bit tangled. But sometimes, other times, it is really fun. And I had that in my last run in Paris. It was the B final, because I came fifth at that event, and they take 4 into the final. So I was the first one out of the final, and they did a little B final. And I started the ramp, and I just got shot out in front of everyone. And I think that is one of the best feelings, when you just feel yourself being shot out of the start line and on just a run where you're going so fast and you can sense they're behind you. I think that's one of the best feelings of the kayak cross. So yeah, it's really good fun. And now the ramp is, sometimes I get distracted in training and I just want to do the ramp, like a Wet and Wild ride,
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I should practice other parts of this sport, but I'm having so much fun just going back up to the ride.
You're like,
and back
Mum,
up.
I've got to perfect this. A few more.
Exactly.
What determines like your positioning on the ramp? Like who, that obviously as 4 of you start,
Yeah.
and is there an advantage to being
Mhm.
in a certain spot?
Yeah, so our positioning on the ramp depends on the time trial, which is the first run that we do. It's a run straight down, and your ranking in that time trial event determines what bib color you get. So, for example, red is the first choice in a ramp. So, the higher up you are in that time trial, the most likely you are to have that red bib to pick in your pool. So, the red is the person that chooses the first, and most courses definitely have an advantage. Sometimes the current is a little bit faster on the left, and so you'll see all the red bibs choose that left line. And then other times it's quite hard to know. It's pretty similar, and if you go first, sometimes you can get screwed over when you think that was the right line, and then you watch the people go after you, and you think, it was definitely that. I should have chosen the right line. So yeah, it's by order of, I guess, the highest ranked athlete in that time trial, and then the highest ranked athlete in the races that come after that. And there's a lot of strategy that comes to play that I guess we aren't used to in the slalom, and a lot of fast thinking and also adaptation. So all of these like live decisions that you have to make during your race, or even when you're waiting to choose, and you feel like you don't have enough information based on what the other people did, or you don't know, you've got to make the decision and you don't know which lane to choose. It all kind of adds to that adrenaline and the whole part of the sport. So much decision making, so much adaptation, and it can definitely be quite overwhelming or hard. You've just got to kind of send it when you go down, and adapt accordingly.
I need to talk about that role. How on earth do you even control that to come up? I mean, you've got your paddle, you need to come up in the right position, in the right direction. Like what's the key to a good role?
I mean, I keep using swimming analogies when I talk about my sport, but you know how tumble turns, when you try to teach someone a tumble turn, they're like, oh, this is too confusing. I don't understand. And then you get it and it's second nature. And for us, a role is definitely second nature. What does come, and you learn it as a child to save yourself from scary situations, to save yourself from drowning, essentially. You learn how to roll back up to make sure that you don't go down swimming the rest of the course. But in this sort of discipline and event, there is that, I think it's more for the crowd to add a level of excitement that we do this role, like an agility type of addition to the event. But what becomes complicated is the positioning of the role. Sometimes they make us do the role just before a drop. So if you're not up in time, it's not good news. And then once you're up, you've got to realize where you are in the course and where the gate is and where you are in comparison to other athletes. And one of the, I guess, hard things that I was exposed to this season was rolling and having someone like roll on top of you or block you so that you roll back up and you're ready to go, and someone's just there and you're like, move,
Yeah.
like get out of my way. So yeah, there's a lot of, again, adaptation, and you see some people trying to like do different rolling techniques to roll up as fast as possible, because that is the goal, to spend less time underwater and more time, getting your boat up quickly. So, exactly, you have like a few 1 second maybe to kind of focus your eyes on whereabouts in the course you are. And maybe even change tactics on what sort of
Mm.
upstream you're going to go to based on who's in front of you or who's behind you. So it's a bit of like that pause section in competition. Not many, I guess, sports have that, where you can actually have a moment where you breathe and recenter yourself, which is nice in a way. But it's also the type of moment where you wake up and you roll up and you're like,
Yeah,
where am I?
exactly.
I've got water in my eyes, my ears are
Yeah.
blocked, and there's a camera right on my face, and I don't want this on the big
Yeah, the
screen.
craziness. And you said, you could have someone on top of you. Like, so that's allowed. It's not like one goes in one at a time. Like there could be two or even three of you.
It's whoever's there first, and yeah, because it's across the whole, river in a sense, you can roll at the same time, and if someone's a bad roller and rolling sideways, they won't get disqualified. They're just not very good at it, and they're just getting in your way, maybe they were a little bit too turned, and maybe you're rolling on someone, or your paddle's just gotten tangled with theirs. So it's all part of it. It also makes for a really entertaining
Yeah.
sport in a sense. I love watching it, and I have asked photographers to not send me photos of the roll, because I don't want to see, the water coming off my face, out of my nose. But it is a really fun part of it, I guess. It depends, again, we're a summer sport, so it's okay. But as soon as it gets a bit too cold, it's like, do we have to do the roll? Is this a really essential part of the sport? Because I don't want to get wet.
Well, funny you say, like, in terms of the photography, the the one that I watched, you were just so smooth and looked like you hadn't, just been rolling underwater. Like, it was
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one.
okay, cool.
I was quite far in front
Yeah,
on that race, I remember. I had time, but sometimes when you're behind
yeah.
or you're next level with someone, it's like, there, you roll over, you're just going for it. But I know I know which race you're talking about, and that was the race in Paris in the B final, and I was quite
Mm.
far in front, so I was like, okay, nice roll,
The cameras.
and then away we
They even
go.
slowed it down. It was beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, Amy, I want to talk more about the mindset around obviously this sport, um, as an athlete, as someone who's working full time and competing, um, all that pressure, and obviously, your family is all very successful. I'd love to know how you handle and what goes through your mind in terms of how you manage the pressure, how you manage expectations externally, but also what are your own expectations on yourself? How do you manage that?
I mean, I think it's something I'm still learning to manage
Mm.
in a sense. It's always a work in progress. And I think it is important to like look back and have that sort of self-reflection of not only how far you've come in that sort of process, but also, the results, and separating yourself from that successful family or from other expectations that you put on yourself. But I think, if I look back, even when I kind of took that ownership to get into the sport and really have my own friends and my own reasons to paddle and train, there always was that sort of, oh, when are you going to beat your sister? And it's still something I get to this day. And there was actually a really great podcast with Bronte Campbell on the imperfects. And she talked about, how hard it is having the greatest of all time as your sibling, and what some people don't understand when they say, oh, when are you going to beat her, and how that affects you, because no one's beating her. That's the reality. She is the greatest of all time. So I think, learning to kind of understand your own story and your own identity, and being able to, write your own goals is something that has definitely helped me kind of manage any sort of expectation. And, at the end of the day, there isn't necessarily an expectation. My mum is the coach. She's not expecting me she's not telling me, you've got to beat Jess, Jess at your age, she was here, or this, or me at your age. It's more like what I've realized is everyone that's supporting me is just trying to help me get or reach the potential that I have or become the best version of myself. And when I can do that, I do get incredible results as well. So I think, yeah, there's been definitely a lot of work on resilience as well, on how to kind of manage those expectations, understand why I do my sport. Is it just because I've been brought up and I'm following and it's second nature, or do I actually have that internal drive to also be the best version of myself, get the results I'm capable of, and because I'm intrinsically driven, and I think that's definitely something I've realized and come to terms with. And there's definitely much more of an enjoyment in the process and acknowledgement of, I guess, my results, because at the end of the day, even if I have the second best results in the Australian team, or if I was a male with my results in the team, I'd be, the best male. But because there's always someone in that discipline, you kind of degrade your own results. You're like, oh yeah, well, it wasn't that great, even though it was a fifth in the final. And you think, actually, in hindsight, that was a great result.
Yeah.
But I think, and it's learning how to deflect those comments that you get sometimes, which is often from your extended family that are like, oh, are you a kayaker as well? And you think, I've only invested 10 years of my life in this sport. But no, I think I've definitely matured in the process of, why I do what I do and what my goals are. And I think with Paris 2024 coming up, the Olympic quota qualification process is to get that extra kayak cross quota for Australia. And Jess wouldn't be competing in that. This is really the first opportunity that I've had to be like, okay, well, I've got a shot at the Olympics for once, because only one person can go to the Olympics normally. And Jess has always been that person, because, again, she is the only person we'd want to send. She's the greatest in our country. But this year, for next year, there is an extra quota qualification spot available for the top 3 countries at that quota qualification event. And so to kind of have this goal as of, now, that's like, okay, well, it is actually a possibility to go to the Olympics, and this is my goal, and this is actually just my project that everyone can help me work towards, I think has been really exciting and cool to also, yeah, like I said, work towards and have that in mind. But yeah, like anything, it is a work in progress. And I think having that balanced lifestyle of, you do your sport, but I also am more than my results outside of the sport, and I work as well. And I have, hobbies or friends, and kind of having that balanced lifestyle and composition to your personality and who you are as a person has always been important for that respect, to not just have my results identifying me, or just, that paddling part of me. And it's definitely something that's made me be able to reflect and draw on the good things, and, be a lot more grateful as well for my situation and what I'm able to do, and all those people that have been and still are trying to help me become the best version of myself. I think that's something a lot of athletes don't realize when you are an athlete, is you have these whole resources and bank of people that are trying to help you become the best person you can on the water or off the water. And I think it's cool to realize that when you're an athlete, and to be able to leverage all of their help and positive vibes and support, and see where that can take you.
Yeah, that's so important. And not only does that help you, obviously, with the sport, but having that support and being able to realize your potential there can transfer everywhere else as well. And I really
Yeah,
love,
definitely.
what you're saying about, realizing your own full potential. As an athlete, I mean, you work so hard, and before we got recording, you were saying you're still full-time working as well as training, a couple of times a day. With all of that going on in your life, does it make you really excited to know that you've got so much happening? You said you're going to go part-time soon with work. Does that get you excited about how much more potential you've got within yourself, because now you've got some more headspace to be able to, take that wherever it needs to go?
Yeah, definitely. I think I have such a tendency of spreading myself a little bit too
Mm.
thin, trying to do so much, saying yes to everything, and I guess like a fear of missing out on like what I'm capable of. I have such incredible friends that are full-time athletes, and that make me think, oh, I'm not investing enough time in my sport. And then I have friends from uni and work that are full-time employees, and they're doing so well, and I think, oh, I'm not investing enough in my career. So kind of having that pull. But, I think looking back the past 2 years working full time have been really great, in the sense of, building that relationship with my work, them realizing what I do and being, proud of that and getting their support. And they let me not work as much during the comps, which is really great. But I think being able to realize that I can make things work, but also being able to realize now that I don't want to make things work like I have in the past, because it is too exhausting. And I am really excited to be, I guess, dropping down, because it's nice just knowing that you have such a huge opportunity ahead of you, and to look back and be like, okay, well, I tried to give myself the best shot, and adapt my life accordingly to also make the most of that time, to not say no, or have to run off to training sessions afterwards because I have a meeting in 5 minutes and I'm still in my wet gear, and not fully recover. So I think that's something that I've definitely acknowledged is probably one of the biggest factors affecting my performance, but also not taking that away completely, because it's also my identity and what I love doing, and it gives me a sense of purpose outside, and giving back, because I do have experience and a master's, etc. So not just becoming a full-time athlete, it doesn't suit my personality. I always want to have something on the side. But also realizing that just because I can, and I don't need to prove a point, or it's too much to work full time. So that's something I am super excited about, having that time, and being able to just kind of relax a little bit more, and not, compromise a lot of things that I am currently in life. So yeah, I think it's an exciting chapter, and also to be able to enjoy summer that's coming up. I've got a lot of international friends that are going to be here, and I've had to say no every time on a Thursday. They've said, "Oh, we're going to the beach," and I'm like, "Oh, I have an 11:30 meeting, and I'm in the office." So yeah, super excited for, I guess, that chapter, and to be able to give it everything and enjoy the process in the lead up to
Yeah,
June, which is my selection event.
absolutely. You deserve it. Noemi, what do you love about this sport?
I think what I love the most, I've said, the social lifestyle part of it, it's really similar to surfing. We get to travel to some incredible locations, meet some really cool people, and it's a small sport, it's a small community. So you travel with your little community to the next World Cup and to the next event. So you really create some lifelong friendships, I think. And I know I've got some friends now that will be maybe later in life have our kids do it too, like my parents did. And I think the other part that I love is more the high performance part of it. So having a goal every single day, I wake up and I've kind of got my routine, and I get to go in the water, and it's something I love so much. That training on whitewater waves, being able to play around and enjoy training at a high level, I think is pretty rare in some sports. I see rowing or swimming or running, and I'm like, they are different elite athletes. I sometimes call myself the lazy elite athlete, in the sense that, I do 2 hours a day, but I love what I do, and I get to paddle with my sister, and obviously my mum's my coach, and other great people that are on my team. So I think it's just the fun element to whitewater kayaking, and the challenge. It's a constant challenge. You've never mastered it, no matter how many medals you get, there's always something to learn, and you're quickly humbled sometimes by the waves. So yeah, I think it's just an ongoing challenge that can take you around the world and meet some really cool people, and there's always something to learn and take away from a training session.
What do you love outside the sport?
What I love outside of the sport is pretty tight, I'd say. Traveling. I traveling and friends. I recently went to Italy to see my friend who's moved there, and we hiked for the whole weekend in the Dolomites. And I was like, "Wow, this is a dream." If I had to sum up or do, one holiday for the rest of my life, it would be this, being with people that I love and hiking or being in nature. I definitely have that big nature part of me that is a lot of who I am. And yeah, I think, those are the biggest things in life. And also my greyhound. My gosh, she's a she's a foster greyhound that we've adopted, and I have to say greyhounds are the coolest dogs ever. They've got such a personality. So another thing that I love outside of the sport is my greyhound.
Yeah, I see. I live by the beach, so I see a lot of people have greyhounds. They just seem like they don't give a shit about anything or anyone.
No, they have such a personality. They
Do
are
they?
such snobs. I came back from Europe and I didn't even get a tail wag. I didn't get one sort of acknowledgement, but I still think her sassy personality is one of the things I love the most. Yeah. So
Just like, oh, hey, you're back.
unfazed, whatever,
Unfazed.
how I aim to be in life is as unfazed as my greyhound.
Oh, brilliant. Noemi, what's your biggest strength?
My biggest strength, this is always a hard one. I think my biggest strength would be my love for life in that sense, like just my willingness to kind of create opportunities for myself. So if we're at a training camp in London, I'm going to make the most of that training camp in London and go to a concert or see other parts of that whitewater stadium. So I think always kind of being able to put things into perspective and have gratitude for where you are and just squeeze the most out of what you can in that moment is something I've developed in the last 2 years, maybe more than previously. So it's definitely something that I noticed this year compared to, I guess, the entourage that you can quickly be around in the international circuit. So yeah, I'd say that's my biggest strength, trying to squeeze everything I can out of every moment, which is also why sometimes I spread myself too thin. So
Yeah.
maybe my biggest strength and my biggest weakness. Who knows?
But I think that's so beautiful, though, and I think we could all take that as a lesson, and I love that analogy, squeezing the most out of every moment, because I mean, you know, you would be forgiven because you have so much on your plate to, I guess, kind of miss things or skip to the next thing because there is so much. But to hear that, just, yeah, it's such a beautiful and great reminder to live every moment and get everything out of it as much as possible. So that's amazing. Noemi, to end this off, I would love for you to give some advice for anyone out there who is an aspiring canoe or kayak slalom athlete, or someone who is wanting to pursue their dreams in any sport. What's the most important piece of advice or lesson that you've learned throughout your career that you would love to share with them?
I think drawing on what I said earlier, back in 2018, those lessons that I learned, I think being able to kind of see every single day or every single session or every single race as a new blank page, no matter what happened, every day is an opportunity to kind of rewrite the narrative and get what you want out of that. So yeah, seeing every session or every race as a new opportunity to kind of not it doesn't necessarily mean do like to be a better person or be a better athlete, but maybe try something different or apply a different perspective or a different approach or mentality to how you do things. I think being able to see the blank side of pages and to rewrite, not carry that baggage or not carry those previous chapters that might be affecting you. Yeah, to be able to kind of swipe it clean and decide what sort of narrative you want to write today and how you want the story to end and break it up like that, because otherwise it's a a big, long journey ahead. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned and still doing. Tomorrow for me, new blank page.
Yeah.
Gonna still continue to write the outcome that I want.
That's so awesome. And every day is a blank page. And yeah, I love that. Write your own narrative. Amazing. Noemi, I love finishing off these episodes with the guest asking a question to the listener, something that they can think about or something that you think is important that they ask of themselves. So, what question do you have for our incredible listener?
That's a really hard one. I think maybe a question I'd ask is, when's the last time that you've kind of reflected on how far you've come? Because I know that in our sport, sometimes, you go from race to race to race to race and you don't get a moment to like sit back and be like, okay, how did I perform? And compared to last year or compared to last race or compared to, the start of my journey, I've come so far, and I think we all kind of get caught up on life and how far we have to go or what level we're not at yet, or how many extra kilos we should be doing in the gym for bench press and things like that. So I think it's a good opportunity to kind of ask yourself, when's the last time you've had a bit of a reflection on how far you've come, and how often do you kind of allow yourself to have those self-reflection moments, because I think it's definitely needed to give ourselves all a little boost from time to time to be like, okay, yeah, well, I used to be petrified of rolling and not pull my deck, and now I do it every single time in training. So.
Noemi, you are sensational. You're an incredible athlete, and I'm so excited to see what you've got in the tank for the coming seasons. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. You are sensational.
Thank you for having me, Jackie. We had a really great chat. It's a lovely way to spend my Thursday afternoon.
What an absolute delight. I am going to put some links in the show notes so you can check out all the videos that I was referring to in the interview with her, doing the kayak roll in the kayak cross and even the ramp, how far they have to go into, well, how high they are and going into the water. It's just incredible. It's so interesting and fun to watch. So I'll put those in the show notes so you can check them out. Make sure you head over to her Instagram, give her some love and follow her journey as well. _Noemi Fox. We'll have the links in the show notes. As always, I appreciate you. Give this episode a 5-star rating, a review if you have the time. I would so appreciate it, because I appreciate you taking the time to choose this episode and this podcast to listen to today. So thank you so much. Have the best day. Stay awesome, and we'll catch you next time.